We want to make sure that everyone is aware that the K-Ready system is dynamic. Those things that you might see today are current as of today, October 23rd, 2024. I'd like to talk a little bit about the assessment tag. We shared this at the beginning of the window back in August, that in order for teachers to see the professional development and have access to the system and the training, they will need to have the assessment tag set in the system, in the K-Ready system. If the teacher has not done so by now, it's very late in the window. The training is not being provided at this time. If there's an issue with regards to a new teacher needing access or entering scores, you'll need to reach out to the Department of Children and Youth at the KRA Help email, and we'll share that later on in the webinar. Our timeline we wanted to talk a little bit about. Clearly, we are well into the assessment window. We're rapidly approaching the November 1st data collection window closing. Again, that's going to close at 11:59 p.m. on November the 1st, and data managers will have until November the 9th, 11:59 on that day, to do all of their cleanup to make sure that everything is complete and ready. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the supports that are available to you. If you have policy questions or guideline information that you need, you're going to want to reach out to the Department of Children and Youth. There you see the information there with the KRA Help email. That's the email you want to use should you have questions. Again, if you're looking for background information about the assessment or you need implementation materials, those kinds of pieces, you're going to want to reach out to the Department of Children and Youth, and you can use that KRA Help email to do that. Likewise, if you have technical questions, you will need to reach out to the Ohio K-12 Help, the help desk. There you see our phone number. You can also go to that web link there listed, and at the bottom of any page on that site, you'll see a support form. So if you click that button at the bottom of the page there, it will open up a form and you could submit your question or technical issue or problem, and someone from our team will respond. We want to make sure that all data managers are aware of the steps that you need to take as we enter this close down period of the fall assessment. One of the first things you're going to want to do is to check to make sure that you have student scores and data and that nothing is missing, everything's completed. And so we'll talk a little bit about how you can get there by downloading the reports, but this is the first step that data managers need to be doing, and not at the end of the window either. You're going to want to do this now and throughout as we come to the November 1st deadline, because you're going to want to communicate with the teachers in case there is information that's missing or scores not included. The next is checking to make sure the teacher status is correct. You want to make sure that they are in active status. If a teacher has moved away, that they are set to inactive. So again, we have some support videos online that can walk you through how to change the status of a teacher. As far as the enrollments are concerned, you need to make sure that students are linked to teachers. Student information and scores will not show up if students are not connected to a teacher. So the enrollments piece is really very, very important, as well as the correct data collection token. There you see in red the token for this year, which is KRA 2024-R. That token needs to be assigned to every student that is being assessed during this current fall window. Next, we have the transfers, and I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about transfers later on, but we want to make sure that this step is also followed, that you're checking the transfers to make sure that you're either initiating transfers if necessary, or that you are approving those transfers that are pending there and waiting for you. Lastly is the point of authority, and again, that's going to be assigned once these transfers are completed. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the transfer section. There's some important information that you need to have. I want to talk about the fact that, again, the window is going to close at 11:59 p.m. on November the 1st. All student data must be entered by that time. So teachers need to make sure that all the student data is entered by 11:59 p.m. on November the 1st. We want you to be sure that you download the desired reports. The reason for that is because that's going to generate an archive for you. And that archive is used in order for you to have a look back So you're able to view prior year's data with the archive, but you need to do that during the current window. So if next year you want to see the data and reports from this year, you need to download those reports now. I mean, if you think about it, you need to make sure you download those reports so they are stored in the archive. As far as the data manager cleanup window, as we mentioned before, that closes at 11:59 p.m. on November the 9th. There are two kinds of transfers. The first is internal. The internal transfer is transferring a student from one building to another in the same district. They are existing students, which means they are currently already enrolled or listed in your system. They have IDs assigned to them and enrollments attached to them. And so in order to do that, you just upload the student ID, upload the enrollment file, and then that's going to generate a transfer. You'll go into that student's record and remove them from that teacher that they were previously attached to in your location, and then the new location will add them to the appropriate teacher. It's important to note that internal transfers will not appear in the KRA transaction history. External transfers, these are a little bit more complicated in that they actually create an automated process that happens. So when a student transfers from out of one district into another, and that new district loads that student with that same ID, that's going to trigger a request. So that request is going to go back to the prior district. So let's say that student that's attending building C here transfers in and they go to a new district, District 1, and they are going to be attending in building B. Building B would then load that student's ID into the system, and that's automatically going to send a transfer notice to District 2, and that district is going to essentially have to approve that transfer. So it's basically saying, hey, we received a student from you. Will you approve this transfer? So data managers are asked to go in and approve or decline the transfer request. There are all kinds of reasons why you might decline a transfer, but most of the time when this happens automatically in the system, you just simply need to go in and click that approve button. We want all data managers to monitor this throughout the window, but especially now as we come to the close because of the POA situation. POA is not going to be assigned until the transfer is completed. And you need to have a POA, which is point of authority, assigned in order for the student to appear on the reports. So again, we want data managers always to monitor and to check the transfer history for status. So you may have some pending transfer requests. You need to go in to approve or decline those requests. Student data may be collected while a request is pending, but the POA will remain with the original district until approved. So once the transfer has been approved, the POA will be updated and the student will be included on the district reports for administrators.
So these first three here, these are all that you can see at the bottom bullet. These are all that you can pull both during and after the window. The first one here is the KRA percentage completion report. And this report is going to show a percentage of students who have completed the entire 27 items of the KRA. And this is used to monitor that progress for the students. The second one is the KRA completion by item report. And this is going to show if a teacher had entered a score, a rating for each student and for each item. And you're able to look at the specific for, like I say, for each of those items to see if there were scores entered. And that is both during and after. And lastly is the language and literacy report. And this report will show students specific language and literacy domain scaled scores. And this is often can be used for reporting both on track and not on track status for reading diagnostic. The second set here is the KRA student and enrollment report. Now, this is going to show you the student enrollment demographic data and teacher assignment. So which students assigned to which teacher. And it's just used to verify that that is connected, that specific student is connected to that specific teacher. This can be generated both during and after. The data downloads report is going to show all teachers, your students, and enrollment data that has been entered into the KReady system. And this is used just to confirm basically a managerial checking that data, what has been added to the KReady system when it comes to the teachers, the students, and enrollments. And that's generated both during and after. And lastly is the KRA Domain Data Report. And this is an Excel file that will show student scores for each item, total points calculated for each domain. And it's used to confirm what scores have been entered for each domain. And like I say, that's both during and after. And lastly are these two, and these are only available after the assessment window closes, as well as after the data manager cleanup window. The first one is the scale score report, and this is going to show all student data, teacher data, and students' overall scores and item level scores. That is what you're going to be using to submit to EMIS for your students. And again, it's going to be available after the data manager cleanup window, and you usually get an email just stating this report will be available or when this report's available. Lastly is the KRA-ISR report. And this report will show a PDF link within the Excel file that you are able to click on and download the specific ISR for that student. And that ISR is used to be shared with families or for each of those students. Now, what I want to do is go live and show you a little bit on how to generate these reports. So I want you to, on that left-hand side, go to your reports and select your drop-down arrow next to create a report. Now, the first one I want to do is what I think is a really good one is to show what scores have been entered, if there have been scores entered, and that is that KRA completion by item report. So select that and select the drop-down for data collection. Select your district, and then select your location. Now, you can see there's two different requests. If you want to look at your district as a whole, so if you have multiple buildings, you can do a district level report. If you're looking for just specifically a location, a specific building, and you want to see which teachers in that building have completed, you would request whichever one you want. So it does take some time to generate, so just give it a minute or so. I did go ahead and generate this earlier because I wanted to show what that looks like. After that downloads and you open that up, you are going to see all the 27 items from M all the way over to AM. Those are all the items, and all your student and teacher information is A through L. Now, looking at this, you see the X's. That means that a score has been entered into the KReady system. So that's great. If you see any blank, so for instance, this specific student, there's a couple scores that haven't been entered. I'm going to want to reach out to this teacher as the data manager and say, hey, this specific student, there's a couple scores missing. Make sure you get those entered in. So you want to look at that, anything that is blank. Once you download this report is yours. So you can, if you wanted to make it easier to be seen which ones are missing, you can highlight those specific cells so you can kind of make sure when you regenerate this the next day, after those teachers enter those scores, then you should not have any blanks in those specific areas. Now, the other report that I want to take a look at, if we go to back to your reports, select your dropdown, is the KRA Domain Data Report. I find this report extremely helpful. You have a lot of information in here, so select your data collection. Now, by default, these are unchecked. However, if you want to have a column that shows whether the student is an ELL student or whether the student has an IEP, you can check those boxes. Again, you'll request if you want to do your whole district or if you want to look at a specific location. Request that report. And for time purposes, I went ahead and generated it earlier. This report is going to have, you can kind of see, I'll make this a little bit bigger here. You can see at the bottom that it's per domain. You have your mathematics, you have the language and literacy, social foundations, and physical well-being. This shows each item. So from what their scores are, what their score was entered for each of those students, and what the total was for each of those specific students. It will give you an average score as well of what that item specifically was the average score. And you can see a lot more detail. So this is a lot. This is great if you want to do more of a data dive and you want to look at this a little bit more in depth. You can see that information listed there. And then I do want to point out when it comes to reports, specifically, if you don't generate a report, it does not get archived. So I highly recommend at the end of the window, even now, just keep generating reports, because if you want to look back at your archives from the previous year, you won't be able to see it if you didn't generate it. So I just want to make sure that is known there. And that really is it. Like I say, the main reports like that will help you specifically making sure everybody's on track. I mean, all of these reports will help. The item completion by item I find is very helpful, percentage completion report. But just remember, the KRA scaled score report and the ISR report cannot be generated until after the window closes, as well as after that data cleanup window closes. One question here was, please discuss the archive feature and how we can use that.
Okay, great.
So when you're using the archives, this is going to show, like I say, any reports you previously generated in previous school years. Any report you generate this school year will be in your archives for next year. So for instance, I was a data manager last year. I want to look at the reports that I generated last year for the KRA. So I'm going to select my year and nothing comes up, but you're going to type in KRA. And this is just going to generate all the reports that you generated for KRA. So you can see which reports that I generated. So for instance, if I wanted to look at the scaled score from last year and compare it to this year, when the time comes, you can see the difference in the scores there and do your own data dive. So like we say, we do encourage just at the end of the school, at the end of the window, generate those reports, looking at those. That way you have those in your archives. Why would I have a staff member without a teacher ID entered, and how do I fix this? So that is a great question. How to fix this is we do recommend every school year, beginning of the year, do a teacher file upload. And when you do that teacher file upload, that basically reattaches those student or those teachers to your district, to the specific location, and has that teacher ID connected. If you go to your users, and let's say I want to look up what Casey's information was listed, select open, select your organizations, and then select the drop-down level arrow next to administrative levels and go to districts. This is you will see the teacher credential ID listed that is in the K-Ready system for that teacher. If it's blank, like I say, you can actually manually enter it in or do a teacher file upload, and it will reattach those teachers to that teacher ID column or to their teacher ID and make sure that they're just reattached to everything. Again, the teacher ID should be 2 letters and 7 digits, or the teacher's email, one of the two.
The question was, why am I not able to see my archives? And the response to that is archives are generated for this fall assessment as long as the window is open. Once the window closes, you cannot generate an archive for the fall window. That being said, archives will only show up for prior years if downloads were generated during the active window. So if there were no downloads generated, you will not see an archive for the prior years.
What is the best way to trigger a transfer request if the new or if the previous district isn't accepting? So you can always re-trigger a transfer request by uploading a student file again with that student information. We do recommend reaching out to that district then and letting them know you triggered that transfer request, that they should see that in their transfers. And from there, they would need to accept it. Ultimately, it is up to the district to accept or decline a transfer. So if they declined it, you may want to reach out to see if what the status is and maybe additional assistance on that end. But to re-trigger, you just want to do a student file upload again.
Responding to a question here, it says, I'm having trouble getting into contact with the KRA data administrator at another school district to accept the transfer request. Do you have contact info for other schools? Contact information for schools and districts can be found using the Ohio Education Directory System, also known as OEDS. So we encourage you to take a look at that and also look for the school district's main website, and look under administration and reach out to the administration if you don't know the specific data manager's name.
There's a great question regarding the assessment tag. Can you explain the assessment tag for teachers? And when it comes to the assessment tag, that was in the very beginning, in order for teachers to see the professional development, they had to be specifically assigned that tag. So for instance, if you go to your users and you find the specific user you are looking for, select open next to their name. And what you will see is right underneath roles, you have assessment tag. So if that was not marked, it would look, the toggle would be off, it'd be gray. To turn that on so the teacher can see their professional development, you click on that toggle and then check mark the box and then hit save. Then that teacher would be able to look at any resources, information regarding the kindergarten readiness assessment. If a student is in our SIS, but they are enrolled elsewhere, what do we do with those students? They are currently inactive as they do not have a teacher attached to them. So on that case, you've done exactly what you need to do. It is up to the new school, the receiving school, to trigger a transfer request to you in order to get the point of authority if you had entered that student in the K-Ready system and if your teacher had also entered scores into the K-Ready system. It is up to that district, the new district, to trigger the transfer request. By you making them inactive, that means that that student will not show on any of your reports, nor will that student show in any or on that teacher's roster. There is a question on how do we remove a user that has administrator, data manager access, but has changed positions and no longer needs that access. So when that happens and they have moved out moved from that position, you will first want to make sure that they are removed in OEDS from that position of assessment data manager. Then we recommend reaching out to us here at the help desk, and we can remove that position from that specific user. You are able to do it with administrators and teachers, but when it comes to data manager roles, only data managers can be added or removed from the K-Ready system by the help desk. So we do recommend reaching out to us, and I would say, like I say, first, make sure that they're removed in OEDs from that assessment data manager role. And you can reach out to us via web form or by phone, and we can help get that person removed from that role. Great question when it comes to cleanup. What specifically are you looking for? And what you're looking for is to make sure all scores have been entered for all of your students, all of your teachers, all scores are entered. And you're looking to make sure that any transfers, outgoing, incoming transfers are all completed, and that you have the point of authority for your students, all your students, because if you do, they will show on that report or any report. And you want to make sure all of that is complete. So that's really what you're looking for. I do recommend too, if you uploaded your students and just did a required fields, I do recommend doing an all fields student file upload, just to make sure that if you wanted to do a deeper dive into the data. So such as if you have any students that had an IEP or ELL, that way it's just a better data information for you when you generate those reports. And whether you're doing them right now or if you're doing them at the beginning of in January, you want to make sure that you have that information, and that way you can kind of do a deeper dive into that data. Great question when it comes to how do I remove administrators that are no longer in the district? And for this, as a data manager, you're able to update your users. As long as they're not a data manager, you can manually remove them from the KRA system and attached from your district. So if you go to your users and you find specifically the user you are looking for, you can, so for this one down at the bottom here, has admin access, and as a data manager, you can actually, anybody who has the role of teacher or administrator, you can remove that are no longer with your district. So select open next to their name, and you want to just go ahead and make that user inactive, and you can remove the role from them and then hit save. Now, to make sure they're no longer going to show in your users, you want to remove them completely from your district. So select organizations, select the administrative level, select the drop-down arrow, and go to districts. If they were attached to any of these districts, you would have the remove button. So at this point, they're not attached to any there. And just double check your locations and make sure that they're not attached. Oh, wait a minute, they're attached to the ELA test location here for me and another location. So I'm going to remove them completely. Hit remove. And to the second one. And now when you see the user there, go back to your main users again and type in that person's name. And then you will no longer see them attached to your users. And again, you can do that for people in roles of teacher and or administrator, just not data managers. Data managers can only be removed by the help desk, either added or removed.
If a student transfers in today with no prior KRA, would we need to have one for them? They've put down the answer as no and question mark. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct, right? So if they transfer in from somewhere else, that's why we do the transfer request. So we would assume that they had some KRA somewhere else. If they did not receive, like if they came from out of state or they came from, a place that didn't do the kindergarten readiness assessment, then you wouldn't have a transfer request for any information, and you would not be required to then deliver the KRA to that child.
If the student did not attend another school in Ohio before they came to your district and they entered after the 20 days, there's no reason to enter them into K-Ready. If they have already been entered into K-Ready, you're not going to delete them, you're just going to make them inactive.
Seen a couple questions regarding what is the best way to get a student transferred in KRA if the school doesn't release them. Again, it is up to the previous district to accept or decline a transfer. You can just keep reaching out to them. I'm going to put in there in the chat or in the Q&A here to find who the assessment data manager is for that district, reaching out to them if they have multiple, reaching out to multiple people. And just letting them know you can re-trigger that transfer request by doing a student file upload. And we just encourage just to kind of keep reaching out and seeing more information from them as to maybe there's a reason that they're declining it, or maybe they're just not seeing it and they just haven't accepted it yet. So like I say, transfer emails are not active this year. So we recommend just keep looking at your transfers, checking to see if there's any outstanding from you or if there's any incoming from anybody else, that you get those transfers accepted, declined, and completed before the end of the window. Can teachers see archived reports, or is that only for administrators? So teacher reports are not archived. Only reports that were generated by a person in a data manager role are archived. So if the teacher is trying to look back of what they generate or what their scores were last year, unless they save their report locally is the only way to see that. Or if the data manager of the school also generated the report at the end, they can also share that with the teachers if the teachers wanted to look a little bit deeper for those specific reports from last year. And if your completion report has no scores, you want to look and reach out to your teachers. Make sure that they may have written down the scores and just haven't entered it into the K-Ready system. So you may want to reach out to them individually. Maybe they only have a portion of the scores entered. If you're not having any scores for any of your students, again, reach out to them and make sure that those scores get entered, because you want your deadline for scores to be entered is November 1st at 11:59 p.m. Scores have to be entered. It cannot be entered, cannot be reopened, anything like that to re-enter scores. Scores have to be entered into the K-Ready system by November 1st at 11:59 p.m. Why would a student have 2 enrollments? Does that mean the new district did not put through a transfer request? No, not necessarily. If you have a student that has 2 enrollments, that means that student has been to 2 different districts, has been entered in 2 different districts so maybe one they originally got entered in at, and then they transferred to a new school. Or maybe a student was accidentally entered and thinking that the student was going to that location and went to a different one. So if they have 2 locations or 2 enrollments, that means that they've actually been entered by 2 different organizations within the K-Ready system during the school year. Do I transfer a student, or does the new attending district need to request the transfer? And correct, you as the person who had the student previously, and a student left you and went to another district, that new district is the one who is going to be responsible for triggering that transfer request for that student. Once they trigger that transfer request, you will see that student listed in your transfers, but it is up to them to trigger that transfer request. And I do want to point out that reports that you can pull after the window is that scaled score report. So why can't we access that report at this time, even though scores have been entered? It's because the entire state of Ohio, it is the end date of November 1st. That is available after the window closes, as well as after that data manager cleanup.